Hello and welcome to Life Diary. My name is Mikhailu, and today I want to share with you a deeply emotional story about lost love, missed timing, and a second chance that came when neither of them expected it. If you enjoy honest, real-life stories that stay with you long after they end, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support Life Diary. He had been walking through the same mall for years, convinced his life was already settled. Then a voice from behind said a single sentence that reopened a chapter he believed was long closed. They had loved each other once, lost each other without answers, and never truly replaced that love. What followed forced them to confront the one truth they had avoided their entire adult lives. Hello, my name is Leo. I am 34 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town where not much changes. I work as a freelance designer. I work from home, mostly alone, taking projects from different cities, sometimes from different countries. My days are predictable. My life looks stable from the outside, but it did not always feel complete. I have lived here most of my life. I know every street, every shortcut, every place where people usually stop and remember something. There is a shopping mall near the center of town. I walk through it often, not because I need anything, just because it feels familiar. When I was younger, I believed love was enough. I believed that if two people loved each other, life would somehow adjust. I learned later that life does not adjust. People do. I met Nora when we were both in our early 20s. We were young, impatient, and convinced that what we felt was rare. She was studying law, ambitious, focused, always moving forward. I admired that about her. I was creative, unsure, still trying to understand who I was and where I belonged. Somehow it worked. We balanced each other without even trying. We spent years together. Not perfect years, but honest ones. We talked about the future like it was something close, something we could touch. We talked about cities we would live in, work we would do, children we might have someday. At that age, everything felt possible. Then real life arrived quietly. Nora received an offer to study and work in another city. It was a big opportunity. The kind people wait for. I told her she had to take it. I meant it. I loved her too much to hold her back. But loving someone does not mean you know how to let them go. At first, we tried long distance. Calls every night. Messages during the day. Promises that distance would be temporary. Weeks turned into months. Visits became shorter. Conversations became careful. We avoided difficult topics because we were afraid of the answers. There was no big argument. No betrayal. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence that slowly replaced words. One day, we stopped calling each other first. Then we stopped calling at all. I stayed in this town. I told myself it was practical. Work was here. My routine was here. But deep down, I think I was afraid to move forward without her. Years passed. I dated other women. Some were kind. Some were interesting. None of them felt wrong. But none of them felt right either. Every relationship ended the same way. Quietly. Politely. Without anger. Without relief. I was always present, but never fully there. Sometimes people asked why I never married. I smiled and said I had not met the right person. It was easier than explaining that I met her too early and then lost her too quietly. Nora and I did not stay in touch. I knew nothing about her life. I did not follow her online. I did not ask mutual friends. Some part of me believed that if I did not know, it would hurt less. But forgetting someone is not the same as healing. There are places that keep memories alive even when you try to move on. For me, one of those places was the mall. We used to walk there together when we were younger. Not to shop, just to talk. To plan. To imagine. Now I walk there alone. I pass the same stores. The same cafe. The same bench near the window where people stop to rest. Everything looks familiar, yet slightly distant, like a photograph from another life. I never expected to see her again. I never imagined that some stories do not end when you think they do. At that point, I still believed my life was settled. Incomplete, but stable. I did not know that the past was about to step out from behind me and remind me that some goodbyes never really happen. I was walking through the mall like I always did. Slowly, without purpose. My hands in my pockets, my phone silent. I had finished work earlier than usual that day, and instead of going home, I followed my. The mall was neither crowded nor empty. Just enough people to disappear among them. I passed the bookstore, the electronics store, the cafe near the escalator. Everything looked the same. I remember thinking that this place felt frozen in time, like it refused to move on, even when people did. That was when I heard it. Not loud, not dramatic, just a voice behind me, calm and familiar. Leo, you're still walking here alone. For a moment, I did not react. My first thought was that my mind was playing a trick on me. Memory can sound convincing when it wants to. I took 2 more steps, trying to ignore it. Then the voice said my name again. Leo. I stopped. I turned around slowly, almost afraid of what I would see. And then I saw her. Nora stood a few steps behind me. Not exactly the way I remembered her, but close enough to make my chest tighten. Her hair was shorter now. Her face looked calmer, more composed. There were lines near her eyes that had not been there before. Not from sadness. From living. For a second, neither of us said anything. The noise of the mall continued around us. People passed between us, unaware that something fragile was unfolding in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. You didn't change much, she said finally. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say something clever, something meaningful. Instead, I managed only a quiet, honest sentence. You did. She smiled. Not the kind of smile meant to impress. The kind people use when they recognize a truth they were not prepared for. I almost didn't say anything, she admitted. I saw you from behind and knew it was you. I told myself to keep walking. So why didn't you? I asked. She looked at the floor for a moment, then back at me. Because some things don't disappear just because you leave. We stood there awkwardly, like strangers who shared too much history to pretend otherwise. I noticed she was holding a small folder under her arm. Work documents, probably. That felt very Nora. What are you doing here? I asked. I'm in town for a few days, she said. Work meetings. I wasn't planning to run into anyone I knew. I live here, I replied. Still. I know, she said softly. That's why I came here today. I remembered you used to walk through this mall when you needed to think. That surprised me. You remember that? I asked. I remember more than you think, she answered. There was a pause. One of those pauses where 1,000 questions exist, but none of them feel safe to ask. Do you want to sit? She asked. Just for a moment. We walked to the cafe inside the mall. The same one we used to visit years ago, though neither of us mentioned it. We sat across from each other, holding warm cups we barely touched. So, I said after a while, how has your life been? She took a breath before answering. Busy, she said. Successful, according to other people. I became a lawyer, just like I planned. I moved cities, changed apartments, changed routines. And happy? I asked. She hesitated, just enough to tell me the truth before she spoke. I was fine, she said. I was always fine. I nodded. I understood the difference. She asked me about my life. I told her about my freelance work, about staying in the same town, about routines that kept me grounded. I did not tell her about the emptiness that followed me. I did not need to. She seemed to sense it anyway. Did you ever regret staying? She asked. I thought about it. No, I said slowly. But I regretted not knowing how to leave. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing something she had missed before. I never stopped thinking about you, she said quietly. Not every day, not in a dramatic way, but you were always there. Somewhere. My heart beat faster, but I kept my voice steady. Why didn't you reach out? I asked. Because I was afraid you had moved on, she said. And I didn't want to be the past knocking on your door. I smiled sadly. I never moved on, I admitted. I just learned how to function. We sat in silence again. This one felt different. Less heavy. Almost peaceful. When we finally stood up, it felt natural. Like continuing a conversation that had only been paused. I'm glad I said your name, she said as we walked toward the exit. So am I replied. Outside the mall, we stopped. The sky was already getting darker. Maybe we could talk again, she said. Before I leave. I'd like that, I said. And I meant it more than anything I had said in years. As she walked away, I realized something simple and terrifying at the same time. I had spent years believing my story was finished. But some stories wait patiently, until you are brave enough to turn around. We met again the next evening. There was no dramatic planning, no hesitation. Just a short message from her saying she was free after work, and my reply coming almost instantly. We chose a quiet place not far from the mall, a small cafe with dim lights and wooden tables. It felt safer somehow, less exposed than the open space where we first spoke. When she walked in, I stood up without thinking. It surprised me how natural that felt. She noticed and smiled, a little embarrassed, a little touched. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, I replied. I wanted to. We sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much. She wrapped her hands around her cup, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. I've been thinking about yesterday all day, she said. About how strange it felt. Seeing you again like that. Strange how? I asked. Like no time had passed, she answered. And like too much time had passed at the same time. I nodded. That was exactly it. We talked slowly at first. About small things. About the cafe. About work. About how the town had changed and how it had not. It felt like we were carefully testing the ground, making sure it would not break under us. Eventually, the conversation shifted on its own. I never stayed in one place for long, she said. Even after I became a lawyer. I moved apartments, changed offices, changed cities when I could. I told myself I liked starting over. And did you? I asked. She thought about it. I liked the idea of it, she said. But every new place felt temporary. Like I was visiting my own life instead of living in it. I recognized that feeling too well. I stayed, I said. In the same town, the same routines. Everyone thought I was stable, reliable. But I was just afraid that if I moved, I would finally have to admit that something was missing. She looked at me with quiet understanding. Did you ever love anyone else? She asked. The question was direct, but her voice was gentle. Yes, I said honestly. In my own way. I cared. I tried. But it always felt like I was borrowing emotions that didn't belong to me. She let out a slow breath. I had relationships too, she said. Good men. Kind men. Some of them wanted a future with me. And? I asked. And I couldn't give them all of myself, she said. I kept waiting for a feeling that never came. We sat there in silence, the weight of years pressing softly between us. I used to think something was wrong with me, she continued. That maybe I wasn't built for real attachment. And now? I asked. Now I think I just left something unfinished, she said. Her words stayed with me. I looked at her and saw the person she had become. Confident, thoughtful, still guarded, but no longer hiding behind ambition alone. And suddenly, I understood something that had confused me for years. I never stopped loving you, I said quietly. I just convinced myself it was easier to live without saying it. She met my eyes. I never stopped either, she replied. I just learned how to survive without you. That was the moment something shifted. There was no rush to touch. No sudden confession filled with drama. Just a shared truth, spoken calmly, as if it had been waiting for the right time to surface. We walked after that, through streets we both knew, even though we had walked them separately for years. The conversation flowed easier now. We laughed about memories that no longer hurt, about how young we had been, how certain we had felt without knowing anything. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? She asked. All the time, I admitted. But I don't think we were ready back then. She nodded. I don't think so either, she said. We loved each other, but we didn't know how to choose each other. We stopped near a quiet corner of the street. The air was cool. The city lights reflected softly on the pavement. I leave in 3 days, she said. The sentence landed heavier than I expected. I know, I replied. I don't want to disappear again, she said. Not like before. Neither do I said. But I don't want to rush you. Or us. She smiled slightly. For the first time, she said, I don't feel like rushing is the problem. We stood close, closer than before, but still careful. There was comfort in that restraint. Before we said goodbye, she reached for my hand. Just briefly. Enough to make her point. Nothing else ever felt right, she said. I think that's why seeing you scared me. It scared me too, I admitted. But it also feels like coming home. She squeezed my hand once and let go. That night, walking back alone, I realized something had changed. I was still alone on the street, but the emptiness I had carried for years felt lighter. As if it finally had a name. As if it finally had a direction. The days that followed felt unreal, but not in a dramatic way. They felt calm, grounded, almost ordinary, and that was what made them powerful. Nora and I did not rush into anything. We talked every day. Long conversations in the evenings, short messages during work hours, quiet walks when she finished meetings and I finished my deadlines. There was no pretending this time. No trying to impress. No fear of saying the wrong thing. We spoke honestly, even when it felt uncomfortable. On the second evening after our long walk, she asked me something I had not expected. Do you ever wonder who you would have become if we had stayed together back then? She asked. I thought about it for a long moment. Yes, I said. But I think we would have broken each other. We didn't know how to listen. We only knew how to feel. She nodded. I think so too, she said. We were in love, but we were also afraid. We just didn't know it yet. That conversation stayed with me. The next day, she invited me to have dinner at her hotel restaurant. Not because it was romantic, but because it was convenient. That was very Nora. Practical. Honest. We sat by the window. She looked tired, but relaxed. I leave tomorrow evening, she said quietly. I know, I replied. There was no sadness in her voice. Just reality. I don't want to repeat the past, she continued. I don't want another goodbye that feels unfinished. What do you want? I asked. She met my eyes without hesitation. I want to keep going, she said. Slowly, but clearly. That night, something settled between us. Not a promise. A decision. When she left town the next evening, I watched her walk through the station without that familiar sense of loss. We hugged. A real hug this time. Not careful. Not restrained. This isn't goodbye, she said. I know, I replied. The first week after she left, we learned how to exist in each other's lives again, this time as adults. Video calls instead of memories. Shared calendars instead of missed timing. We spoke about our days, our work, our routines. She showed me her apartment. I showed her my workspace. Nothing felt forced. One evening, she said something that changed everything. You know, she said, you could work from anywhere. I smiled. I know, I said. I always knew. I just never had a reason to leave. She did not respond immediately. Would you consider coming here? She asked finally. There it was. Simple. Direct. No pressure. Yes, I said. I already am. I visited her city a week later. I arrived with a small suitcase and no expectations. She picked me up herself. When I saw her waiting outside the station, something inside me relaxed in a way I had never experienced before. She showed me her life. Not the version she presented to others, but the real one. The quiet evenings. The work stress. The moments of doubt. The loneliness she never spoke about. I stayed for 5 days. We cooked together. Worked in silence. Took walks without needing a destination. Everything felt surprisingly easy. On the 4th night, we sat on her balcony, watching the city lights. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you. Of losing this again. I'm scared too, I said. But I'm more scared of walking away. That was when we chose each other. Not with words. With action. A month later, I moved. Not dramatically. No speeches. No tears. Just boxes, logistics, and a quiet certainty that this was right. I kept my clients. I adjusted my schedule. She adjusted her routine too. We met in the middle. Living together was not perfect. It was real. We argued about small things. We learned each other's habits. We learned how to apologize properly. How to give space without creating distance. One evening, as we were cleaning the kitchen, she stopped and looked at me. You know, she said, this feels safe. I smiled. It does, I agreed. Weeks turned into months. Life settled into something steady and warm. One morning, while drinking coffee together, she said, almost casually, we should probably talk about the future. I laughed softly. I think we already are, I said. The engagement was quiet. No kneeling in public places. No audience. Just a conversation that ended with a yes that felt obvious. Later that year, she stood in the doorway holding a small test in her hand, her expression unreadable. I think you should sit down, she said. I did. When she showed me, I felt something shift inside me. Fear, joy, disbelief, all at once. We'll figure it out, I said. I know, she replied. That's why I'm not afraid. That night, lying beside her, I realized something important. Love did not return to us suddenly. It grew back slowly, stronger than before, because this time, we chose it consciously. Life did not suddenly become perfect. It became clear. The weeks after we found out about the pregnancy were filled with quiet adjustments. Doctor appointments, changed routines, long talks late at night when the city outside was silent. We were careful with each other, not fragile, but attentive. Like people who understood that something important was growing and deserved patience. Nora continued working as a lawyer, though she slowed down when she needed to. I rearranged my freelance schedule completely. For the first time in my life, my work felt like it fit around my life, not the other way around. One evening, while we were sitting on the couch, she rested her head on my shoulder and said something simple. I don't feel alone anymore. Neither did I. We talked openly about everything. About fear. About money. About the future. About what kind of parents we wanted to be. There were no illusions this time. We knew love did not protect you from responsibility. It asked for it. The wedding plans came naturally. No pressure from family. No expectations to meet. Just a small ceremony, close friends, and a quiet promise to keep choosing each other even when life became difficult. A few months before the wedding, we went back to my hometown together. Not because we had to, but because I wanted her to see where I had stayed for so long. We walked through the streets I knew too well. She held my hand the entire time. "Now I understand why you stayed," she said. "You weren't stuck. You were waiting." On our last day there, we walked through the mall. The same one. It was almost empty in the morning. The stores were opening slowly. The cafe lights were still dim. Everything looked exactly as it had years ago, and yet everything felt different. We stopped near the place where she had first called my name. "You know," she said, smiling softly, "this place doesn't feel heavy anymore." "It doesn't," I agreed. She looked at me and repeated the words that had started everything, but this time her voice carried no sadness. "You're not walking here alone anymore." That was when I understood something fully for the first time. The mall had never been the reason I came back. It was just where my life paused, waiting for the right moment to continue. We left town that afternoon. The wedding was small, simple, honest. No speeches that promised perfection. Only promises to stay present, to speak when it was hard, and to listen when it mattered most. When Nora walked toward me, I did not feel nervous. I felt steady. That surprised me. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the city lights reflected softly through the window, she sat beside me and took my hand. "We found our way back," she said. "We finished what we started," I replied. Our child was born the following spring. Holding my son for the first time, I felt something settle inside me that I had never been able to name before. Not excitement, not fear, a sense of arrival. Nora watched us quietly, her eyes full, her smile tired and real. In the months that followed, life became louder, messier, more demanding. Sleepless nights, small arguments, big responsibilities. But never once did I feel the emptiness I used to carry. One evening, while rocking our son to sleep, Nora stood in the doorway and watched us. "You know," she said, "if I hadn't said your name that day," I finished the sentence for her, "we would still be living half-lives." She nodded. Sometimes, when life feels heavy, we talk about that moment. Not with regret, but with gratitude. For timing. For courage. For not walking past each other again. We did not find new love. We returned to the only one that ever felt true and finally allowed it to grow. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Stories like this remind us that some feelings don't disappear with time. They wait for the right moment to be heard again. Life doesn't always give us second chances, but when it does, the hardest part is recognizing them. What do you think about this story? Do you believe that true love can survive years of silence and distance? And if you met someone from your past today, would you be brave enough to stop and listen? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them.